What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Wrestling Decoded, and today we're telling a story that, for almost a decade, most people in wrestling genuinely believed would never have an ending worth telling. CM Punk walked out of WWE in January 2014 as a bitter, broken relationship between a company and its biggest homegrown star. He was fired reportedly on his own wedding day. He publicly announced he was done with wrestling entirely. And yet here we are in 2026, watching a man who once seemed permanently exiled from WWE become arguably its biggest storyline of the past 3 years. So let's actually walk through the whole thing, start to finish, because this genuinely might be the strangest career arc professional wrestling has ever produced. Let's get into it. If you're into these full-story deep dives on wrestling's biggest real-life sagas, that's exactly what this channel does. Go ahead and subscribe before we start. Act 1. The Fall. By early 2014, CM Punk had spent nearly a decade building himself into one of WWE's most genuinely compelling performers, headlined by the 2011 Summer of Punk run and his legendary pipe bomb promo, plus a reign as WWE champion that stretched 434 days, one of the longest of the modern era. But behind the scenes, tension had been building for years over creative direction and how the company was handling his health. On January 26, 2014, at the Royal Rumble, Punk wrestled what turned out to be his final match for nearly a decade. The very next night, he walked out of the company entirely. WWE officially released him later that year, with reports at the time indicating the release notice came on the same day he was marrying AJ Lee, which is about as bitter an ending as professional wrestling has ever produced for one of its own top stars. Punk publicly announced his retirement from wrestling shortly after, and for years, that seemed like it would simply be the final chapter of his in-ring career. Act 2. The Wilderness Years, and this is the part of the story most fans genuinely believed would never have a second act at all. Reports later surfaced that Punk had actually attempted to work his way back into WWE around 2019, while serving as an analyst on Fox's WWE Backstage program. But according to sources close to the situation, WWE simply had no interest in bringing him back at that point. Then, in 2021, Punk shocked the wrestling world by returning to in-ring competition entirely, not with WWE, but with the upstart promotion AEW, his first match in 7 years. For a moment, it looked like this was going to be the actual redemption story. It wasn't. His AEW run got derailed repeatedly by injuries and, more damagingly, by real backstage conflict, including a highly publicized brawl involving members of the Elite following the All Out 2022 pay-per-view. That tension never fully resolved, and in September 2023, AEW fired Punk following another legitimate backstage altercation, this time with fellow wrestler Jack Perry at the All In pay-per-view. By that point, Punk had now been fired from 2 major wrestling companies within a decade, and plenty of respected voices in the industry, including Booker T, publicly doubted he'd ever find his way back into WWE at all. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you'd told wrestling fans in September 2023, right after his second major firing, that Punk would be WWE's biggest storyline within 2 years, how many of them do you think would have actually believed you? Act 3, The Return, and this is where the story genuinely becomes one of the most unlikely in wrestling history. On November 25th, 2023, at Survivor Series War Games, in his own hometown of Chicago, CM Punk walked back out onto WWE programming for the first time in nearly 10 years. The reaction was described by people who were there as absolutely seismic, a moment nobody, not even the most optimistic fans, genuinely expected to see happen after everything that had come before it. Following a reported bidding war between the Raw and SmackDown brands, Punk signed with Raw and immediately ignited fresh rivalries with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, the same Drew McIntyre whose attack on Punk's arm at the 2024 Royal Rumble ended up sidelining him with a genuine injury and keeping him out of WrestleMania XL entirely. That injury became the foundation of what many consider the best rivalry WWE produced in all of 2024. McIntyre gleefully mocking Punk for the injury he'd personally caused, culminating in a Hell in a Cell match and a loss to McIntyre at SummerSlam 2024, with Seth Rollins serving as the special guest referee overseeing the whole thing. Quick pause here. Drop a comment on where you were when Punk's music hit at Survivor Series 2023, because I genuinely think that's one of those moments every wrestling fan remembers exactly how they found out about. By November 2024, WWE clearly saw enough value in this second act to commit fully, signing Punk to a reported 3-year deal running through November 2026. And 2025 is where the redemption arc actually completed itself. Punk's own Summer of Punk language returned in full force as he made good on his own nickname, the best in the world, by defeating Gunther via pinfall at SummerSlam 2025 to capture the World Heavyweight Championship, an actual world title victory over a decade after his last one, in the same company that had fired him on his wedding day. That reign didn't last especially long, reportedly ending within minutes thanks to Seth Rollins. But Punk quickly found himself back in a title picture regardless, challenging Jey Uso for a vacant championship at Saturday night's main event not long after. From there, the story built toward its biggest showcase yet, a program with Roman Reigns that carried all the way to WrestleMania 42, where Punk ultimately dropped the World Heavyweight Championship to Reigns in the main event. The following night on Raw, Punk had a brief, pointed interaction with WWE champion Cody Rhodes, seemingly teasing a future confrontation, and then, notably, he simply disappeared from WWE programming entirely after that appearance on April 20th. That absence sparked genuine uncertainty across the wrestling world for weeks. Rumors circulated about backstage tension, and some reports suggested creatives simply had no immediate plans for him. But according to Fightful Select's reporting, several sources close to the company confirmed Punk didn't ask out of his contract, wasn't asked to take a pay cut, and wasn't off television due to any disciplinary issue. He had, in their words, simply earned a break after carrying a heavy workload since his return. As of this writing, in July 2026, reports indicate WWE is planning to bring Punk back for SummerSlam 2026, held August 1st and 2nd in Minneapolis, with some suggesting he could even reappear as early as Saturday night's main event, and further reports indicating he may resurface specifically on the SmackDown brand once he returns, potentially setting up a continuation of his rivalry with Roman Reigns. So here's the actual shape of this entire story, laid end to end. A man fired under about as bitter circumstances as wrestling can produce, who publicly retired, who tried and failed to get his old job back years later, who found brief hope in a second promotion only to get fired from that one too, and who then returned to the exact company that let him go, not as a nostalgia act, but as a legitimate top-of-the-card world champion 3 separate years running. It's not a clean, simple redemption arc. There were injuries, disappearances, real backstage conflict, and genuine uncertainty scattered throughout nearly every chapter of it. But that messiness might actually be what makes it land as convincingly as it has. Nobody scripted a decade of real setbacks into this story ahead of time. It just happened to play out that way in real time in front of an audience that had genuinely given up hope of ever seeing it happen at all. Where do you think this story goes next? Does the SmackDown move set up one final run at the top of the card, or is Punk closer to the end of his in-ring career than people realize? Let me know your take in the comments. And if you want more of these full story deep dives on wrestling's biggest real life sagas, make sure you're subscribed to Wrestling Decoded. There's plenty more of this still to uncover.